Hey everybody, welcome to Shine the Light. So this channel is all about just trying to understand our anxieties and PTSD triggers. I'm not a doctor, but I am somebody that suffers from severe anxiety and PTSD. So I'm in the same boat as you, and I definitely understand the struggle, especially whenever we don't know really where it came from. So obviously, if you have PTSD or if your anxiety is triggered by a certain event or smell, environment, anything like that, then you know how to avoid it. But there's a lot of times that anxiety or panic can actually just come out of the blue. And to me, I always think that those are a lot worse because you can be going about your day, everything's just fine, and randomly you're just in this state of mind. So I kind of wanted to just talk a little bit about that, on tips and advice on how I manage it or kind of control it in a sense. So my biggest piece of advice is to be able to, whenever you do get hit with an anxiety attack or panic attack, PTSD triggers, if you are at all possible to write them down, whether it's pen and paper or text it to yourself on your cell phone, anything like that you can write down what you were thinking, where you were at, who you're with, different things like that. And if you see a pattern where it's like, oh man, I tend to feel more anxious whenever I'm around, 5 or more people, or I'm more anxious whenever I have to go into the grocery store. I'm more anxious whenever I'm home alone. Things like that can really help you start identifying, once you see the patterns of what it is that you're doing, what you're thinking of, what's going on around you, to be able to start identifying what possibly could be a trigger, even if it is something that is not PTSD related. If you have social anxiety and you're just coming to find that out, you'll see these patterns that you actually start feeling more anxious whenever you're around people, around a group of people, or people that you don't know, going into a job interview or starting your first day of school, something like that. And you'll be able to identify these patterns. So whenever you're going into a situation, obviously you can't avoid every situation that is a trigger, but you can at least prepare yourself. And we can definitely get into more tips in another video on how to prepare yourself. I just wanted to talk real quick about things that I do to help me identify what it is that triggers me, especially whenever I don't know. So obviously I have PTSD and I know what triggers me from my PTSD. So I know that, for example, I hear loud noises, especially like bangs or like doors slamming, something just real loud and sudden. That's something that triggers my PTSD and my anxiety, sometimes leading into a panic attack. I obviously can't control, my neighbors from shutting their doors too loud or things like that. But whenever I've identified it, so what I can do is I can combat it. So when I do hear my neighbors slam their door, for example, I can then make that conscious decision to not let it overpower me. And of course, sometimes it gets away from me, and it does. It affects me, and it's just something that I have to go through. But usually whenever I do hear a loud noise like that, I can talk to myself and say, hey, the neighbors just came home. You know that they have little kids. They're constantly slamming the doors. They don't mean any harm. I'm safe. And then that's when I go into my positive mindset of just really talking to myself in a logical way of knowing what that sound was and talking myself down to realistically look at the situation. I'm in no harm. It was my neighbors. Everything is fine. Again, sometimes I still get triggered into an anxiety attack, but it's something that will usually, almost always, be a little bit less intense of an anxiety attack because I have identified that trigger. So again, even if it's something that's not PTSD related, you're just noticing that you're just getting a lot more anxious with certain situations or smells or around certain people even. Sometimes certain people can bring up our anxiety or our train of thoughts. So if we're constantly focused on our bills not being paid, or our car broke down and how are we going to get into work, the more that we realize, we're writing these things down saying, well, I felt anxious the last time whenever I started going through my financial statements and figuring out how I'm going to pay my bills, and I'm feeling anxious now, and that's exactly what I'm doing again. I'm thinking about what bills I need to pay. So you can find those patterns, and it definitely takes some time, but once you find those patterns, again, you can help yourself eliminate or reduce the intensity. Again, not a doctor, just my personal tips on how I combat and manage my severe anxiety, panic, and PTSD. So thank you so much. I greatly appreciate every single one of you, and I hope that this helped somebody out there. And take care.